Welcome, everyone. I'm Diane with EdWeb, and it's my honor to introduce our presentation today with the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. I'm here with Kathy Metcalf, Executive Director of Education for the Society, and our honored guest, Medal of Honor recipient Sergeant Ryan Pitts, who received the medal for his service with the U.S. Army in Afghanistan. Again, thank you all for attending. Okay, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Diane. Good morning, everyone, particularly Ryan. Thank you for being here with me this morning. And I'd like to say thank you to the EdWeb audience, to the sponsors of the Medal of Honor Society who make it possible for us to do this, and greetings to our full educator audience. I see we have a really hugely diverse audience today. I'm going to start, as I always do, with a little bit of background so that you all will be able to have a better sense of what you should be looking for as we go through this webinar and what will be appropriate for your students once you get an opportunity to reconnect with them or perhaps share some or all of this webinar with them. The Medal of Honor is the highest military award that the United States presents to our servicemen or women for actions in combat. It is a combat award, and therefore today there may be some mention of combat and the kinds of things that Ryan and his team faced when they were in combat. And I would want especially those of you who are early elementary and preschool teachers to be aware of that. The medal is generally presented with the words "for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of one's life above and beyond the call of duty." The Medal of Honor Society is the group of Medal of Honor recipients, currently 69 living recipients, who back the Medal of Honor Character Development Program, which is a character resource for both elementary and high school. But the high school program, middle and high school program, was the beginning program. And it is all based on stories like Ryan's, stories of Medal of Honor recipients, their actions, and how the Medal of Honor represents the values of courage, commitment, integrity, sacrifice, citizenship, and patriotism. So that's our subject for today. So educators, if you find that is not what you are here for, please be aware of that and be prepared to edit this webinar as need for your students later. So for more information on Ryan's actual action, as he told me yesterday, you can Google him. He pops up right away, and there are lots of very good interviews out there with Ryan from a variety of sources, from the American Legion to our friends at the Cantini Museum. At the Pritzker Military Library, with Dr. Paul Herbert who was with the Cantini Museum at the time, from the American Legion. The White House recording of your medal ceremony is there, so that also presents some background. Early introduction to you as a Medal of Honor recipient. So you can do your research for that. I am only going to tell you that Ryan's medal was indeed for extraordinary acts of heroism at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty in Afghanistan, where his unit was a total of about 49 forces on the American and local side, was overrun by 200, nearly overrun by 200 enemy. So it was a very intense battle, and that the actions that Ryan took in that time were what merited him the Medal of Honor. But we're going to talk about what made you the person that could do all those things, Ryan. So if you would introduce yourself and give us a little background. Usually characters set in youth. Tell us a little about yours.
Sure. I grew up in New England, so I was born in Massachusetts, but I've spent time in New Hampshire and Vermont and all over. So I'm a Patriots fan, Red Sox fan, all that stuff. As a kid, I would like to say that I played a lot of sports, but I didn't, because I was pretty terrible at everything I ever played. Was not very coordinated. Towards high school, my parents got into having I call it a hobby farm. So we had pigs and cows and sheep and chickens and turkeys and things like that. So grew up working around the farm there. I also worked at a horse farm when I was in high school. Did a lot of, I guess for me, what I considered normal kid stuff. I played a lot of paintball growing up, hanging out with friends, running through the woods, building tree houses that really weren't fit for anyone. I wish that I had applied myself more in school. I didn't. I'm guilty. I was probably one of those kids that was a distraction in your classes. And yeah, solid B student. That might be generous. Mainly because I just didn't apply myself. Um, but luckily that changed. I have far more of an appreciation for education now, especially where I have small children.
Okay, great. Now, you told me that you went ahead and signed up for the Army when you were a senior in high school. So, and that's partly because you were having trouble figuring out what you wanted to do before then?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with that. But when I was a senior in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Didn't know what I wanted to go to school for. My parents, they worked hard, but they didn't have the money to put me through school. And if they had, I didn't feel like I would make the best use of their resources immediately. I didn't see myself applying myself. And so I joined the military. Honestly, for me, it was money for college. And I felt it would be constructive serving. I would learn other things and then come back and be prepared for whatever the next phase was going to be.
I think a lot of us don't know what we want to do when we grow up and spend a lifetime figuring that out. So, and college. So you didn't go in with an intent on a career in the military, but rather to serve and then take advantage of the VA bill and that sort of thing.
Correct. Yeah. So I enlisted for 4 years. My plan was to serve my 4 years and then come home and go to school. And well, things did change while I was in. So I was supposed to get out in August of 2007, but I got stop loss. So stop loss at that time, the military, if you were trying to get out, but your unit was deploying, if you were within about 6 months of deploying, they would make you go with the rest of the unit. And the whole point of that is you want to keep the team together that's trained together. And when you enlist, you actually go 8 years. And so I wasn't disappointed in that. I accepted it. I wanted to go with my friends. And it was about probably close to being almost a year past the date I was supposed to get out. I was still in Afghanistan. And I had started to think that I really loved being in the military. I loved the brotherhood. I loved the people. I loved the challenges. I loved the sense of purpose and thought that I might want to stay in. But then I got hurt in July of 2008 and really couldn't see myself with the injuries that I had sustained doing what I had wanted to do. And so the plan changed back to the original plan. And I applied for school while I was healing up at Walter Reed and returned and started at the University of New Hampshire in the fall of 2009.
So, did you have any inspiration from other places about going into the university, or I'm sorry, about going into the Army uh, before you actually got in there? I think President Obama said at your award ceremony that you had wanted to be a soldier since you were 3.
Yeah, I don't really remember that, but my family dug up all sorts of old uh, crude art projects that I had worked on that I'd written. I was going to be a professional football player. I was going to retire, and then I was going to join the service. So I wasn't much of an athlete, so only the latter part came true. No one in my family had ever served, not in the military, um, anyways. But I think I'd always seen members of my family, whether it was my parents or my grandparents, serving others, whether that's contributing for a cancer walk or helping neighbors that maybe needed help around their house because they were elderly or sick or something like that. And so I think that sense of service had always kind of been instilled in me. I probably didn't acknowledge it at the time, and I think part of the influence when I was in high school was some of my peers had joined, and that kind of brought it to the forefront for me is okay, this might be a viable option. I will say that when I chose to enlist, I don't want to say people were unsupportive, but I got a lot of why would you do that? I don't think my family was excited about the idea. I mean, especially at this time, we were already in Afghanistan. So this is in January of 2003 when I enlisted. We'd already been in Afghanistan for 2 years. Iraq was looking like a real possibility, and it happened before we conducted the invasion, before I graduated high school. And one thing that's always stuck out was I can remember teachers or peers or some people saying, you know, first of all, this isn't true, but they would say, you're too smart to join the military. To which I would say, why would I be too smart to join the military? My experience, I met tons of intelligent people when I served in the military. Um, some people got GEDs, some had college experience, some just graduated high school and came right in, all different experiences. And I found that academic knowledge doesn't necessarily dictate intelligence. And I think that's a poor narrative to think that you can be too smart to serve your country.
I think that's a really wonderful comment, and I also think that something that our teachers need to know for our students, and for any young people who are watching, they also need to be very aware that they may have heard from people more my age and older generations that if you couldn't think of anything else to do, or if you couldn't do anything else, you could always join the Army. But that is no longer true for any of the military services, that now you have to pass entrance exams, both intellectual and physical. And the services, because we have an all volunteer Army, they're in a position of being able to take who they choose, not who feels like they don't have anything else to do. So I appreciate those comments. I'm actually going to throw in one of the questions that our audience sent in ahead of time, because I think it fits in the narrative right now. Someone asked, many students in rural communities see joining the armed services as a way to get out of their small towns. And since you've been talking about playing paintball in the woods and such, I think this is appropriate. What would you say to a high school senior who thinks that joining up will be a glamorous way to see the world at others' expense?
Well, don't believe what you see in the movies. I think serving, whether this is in the military or anywhere, it's not necessarily what you perceive. It's not necessarily going to match your expectations. It can be a great thing. I found it's really what you make of it. I know that my first 2 years in the military, I was not the biggest fan of it, but nobody really ever enjoys being a private and getting yelled at and um, learning from your failures, which they ensure you do for sure. Um, I think there are a lot of people that join to get away. People join to become citizens. I think in terms of you need to think about what you're joining and why. It's not just to get away. Think about what you're going to be a part of. I had said earlier that I joined because I didn't know what I wanted to be and I wanted money for college. There were other people I served with that joined because they wanted to become citizens. I served with people that came from El Salvador, Great Britain, Mexico, I mean, all over the world. And, some that wanted adventure, some wanted to get out of their small towns. But at the end of the day, it's all about the person to your left and your right. You're fighting and doing everything for each other. It's about others. It's about service. And I think, it is a great way to get out and see the world, but don't lose sight of what the purpose of being there is.
You mentioned in your interview, or actually, it was a presentation with the at the American Legion Convention, that you received more from your service than you gave. Could you reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just from the story of I went into it with the intention of, it's going to buy me some time. I'm going to learn some things. I'm going to get money for college. And service, is one of those things I think like parenthood or really anything, you have to experience it to fully appreciate all the trials and tribulations and the achievements that come along with it.
One of our uh, registrants who signed up ahead of time sent in the question asking, do you think serving in the armed forces has made you a better person?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think one of the greatest things is it's going to push you outside your comfort zone. It's going to challenge you in ways that you've never been challenged before, intellectually, physically, mentally, emotionally. And you learn a lot about yourself. You learn that you can push yourself beyond whatever you think your limits are. Really, they're really just artificial limitations. Um, by far and away, I think the greatest lesson from my service that made me a better person was I was forced to be around people that I may never have been exposed to in my life. People from all sorts of different backgrounds, different cultures. And, you learn that despite your differences doesn't mean you need to respect each other any less. There are plenty of times where I sat around and heard arguments between people, religion, lack thereof. The one I always draw on is when we were deployed, I would sit around and listen, but there would be the people strong in their faith, a lot of conviction. And then there would be some soldiers that were atheists. And they would sit around and they would argue back and forth. And I enjoyed just listening from the outskirts. But at the end of the day, we all wore the same uniform and we went out on that mission. They were ready to risk their lives for each other. And, you get to hear points of view that are different from your own, which are important because my experiences form my opinions, but not everybody has had my experiences, and I haven't had everybody else's experiences. And so hopefully you learn to listen, and that even though we may be different, we don't need to be divided. We can always work together towards common goals.
Boy, there's a line for teachers to take note of. Even though we may be different, we don't need to be divided. That is great. Thank you. One of our viewers just sent in the question: looking back, what do you think is your greatest accomplishment while you were serving in the Army?
I mean, again, it comes back to the people. When I think about my service, I treasure most the friendships and the relationships that I made with people. It doesn't sound like much of an accomplishment, but we really became like family. I mean, I learned that family is not about blood. It's about caring about other people more than you care about yourself. And I've had friends that, risked their lives and gave their lives for me. And, I guess for me, as sad as that is, it was a privilege just to have known people that were like that.
So speaking of friends from the Army, I know you served 2 deployments and your Medal of Honor action was your second deployment, and you lost a fair number of your team members that day. How many do you have who you stay in touch with regularly who survived that event? Do you have a lot of, do you get to see them then?
I mean, over the years, I still continue to see the guys. We stay in touch. Technology's great. Being able to do text message threads, we all get on there and talk back and forth. I just had a soldier that I led. He's gone on to do special forces. He called me the other week, and we caught up. I mean, a lot of us, we've been groomsmen in each other's weddings. Now that we're, I guess, grown up and have families, our families have met. There's nothing that I love more than sitting around and seeing all the kids play together. And for me, that's what we were fighting to come home to, even though maybe we didn't realize it at the time.
Absolutely. Even if it didn't exist, fighting for a future. That is great. I just saw another question pop up. What was the hardest thing about your service? I mean, I think we're talking outside of being so seriously wounded and the recovery.
Honestly, the hardest part was leaving it. Leaving the brotherhood. You get a sense of security when you're in a team like that no matter what comes your way, everything's going to be all right because you have people that have your back. And don't just have your back in the sense that they support you and always agree with you. They support you and will tell you when you're wrong, tell you when you're making mistakes, that they care enough to have the hard conversations and give you the kick in the butt maybe you need sometimes when you're down. And it certainly felt like a sense of loss when I left the military. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but I loved the institution. It was an incredible place with incredible people. And, for me, I certainly felt like I lost a part of myself when I left it. And that's not necessarily true. Yeah, it's more difficult now. I don't live right next door to all the people that I work with and best friends with. But we put in the effort and we stay in touch, communicate, still have those hard conversations when we need to.
I think that you just proved what you were saying about them being like family with the description of the closeness that you had and being honest with each other and such. And so probably a little like moving far away from home when you got out of the service.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does feel like you left your family, and it's one you got to choose.
Well, somebody just wanted to know, and I know this is because they're feeling a fondness for you already, that what do you do now? And I know immediately after college you went into the business world, but are you willing to share what you do now?
Yeah, so I went into corporate America. I worked for two Fortune 500 companies for about 6 years, and then last year decided that I had enough of that. It was a good experience. I learned a lot from it, but it wasn't a great fit for me. And I've since returned back to my family has a small construction business, and I'm helping run that and doing my best to help grow it. So what do? I do a little bit of everything, working with my hands. I do office work. I'm trying to do social media, make new websites, uh, all the joys of being a small business owner operator.
Very, very cool. So that kind of runs into another question somebody asked, and I think that perhaps they didn't know very much about you at the time. They had said, "How did you balance all the parts of your life?" And they mentioned school, which of course you have since completed. But how do you balance work and now your family, of course, and the responsibilities that come with that medal, or the maybe instead of responsibilities, I would say the many opportunities and challenges that come with that medal.
I like how you
Like
flip
this.
that, look through a positive lens on that one. It is challenging, and what I try and look at is that everybody is faced with challenges. All of us have competing interests, family, work, aspirations, and we need to balance those. What I try to do, and sometimes more successful than others, is just prioritize what's most important to me. For me, my family. I have a young daughter; she's 5, Madeline. Son 7, Lucas, and my wife Amy. And they're my top priority is to take care of them. My top priority is to raise my kids to be better than me. I want to help them learn all the lessons that I did. So maybe they don't have to feel some of the same pain that I did, but that's a priority that I make. I got aspirations. I have aspirations with the business that I want to grow that. The medal has brought you opportunities. I think there's a sense of duty that comes with it. I have a tremendous opportunity to be able to talk about the service of others because I can tell you on that day I was just trying to keep up with everybody around me, and more in awe of what I've seen other people do than anything I've ever done. And it gives me an opportunity to keep that perspective. I can advocate for veterans. I can talk about the things that I can keep the memories alive of the men that we lost. And so I think it's something that I have to continue to revisit. It's not, hey, I make a decision and today this is most important and it will be every day. It's situational.
One of the things that you just mentioned about talking about the duty to talk about this, one of our viewers asked the question, how is telling the story of your Medal of Honor action help you honor and remember those who served with you? And because I've watched all these other videos, I noticed that every single time you have a speaking engagement, you name those who were lost. What what are your thoughts on honoring and remembering those who gave the full measure of sacrifice?
I think about the guys, and I'm going to rattle off their names. So Sergio Abad, Jonathan Ayers, Jason Bogart, Jonathan Brostrom, Jason Hovader, Israel Garcia, Matthew Phillips, Pruitt Rainey, Gunners Willing. Those are on the day that I was wounded. We also lost Matthew Kaler. We lost Jeffrey Mersman, Matt Ferrara, Lancor, Lester Roque. Prior deployment, we lost Michael Schaefer. We lost Matt Polskowski, and then a lot of others across the battalion. And, they sacrificed everything so that I could be here and so the rest of us could come home. And so I see it as an obligation to share their stories and try and do good where I can with the gift that they gave me. In my mind, I'm living on borrowed time. They gave me everything I have, my family. I wouldn't have anything without the sacrifices that they made. And, they taught me so much to be able to share some of the lessons that they taught me. For example, Jason Hovater. In an infantry platoon, we were paratroopers, so we jumped out of planes. And it was an infantry company. There's not a whole lot of talk about your fears and what you're afraid of. If anything, you're going in thinking you're the best. Everybody's courageous, ready to beat your chest. But Jason Hovater had the courage to talk about how he was afraid of dying when we were deployed. And he would talk about that openly with us. And at the same time, anytime that we faced any sort of adversity, Jason Hovater was right there. And on that day where I was wounded, we were at a different position. We had taken a number of casualties. We were getting low on the number of guys that could get in the fight. And when Lieutenant Brostrom went to Jason Hovater's position and asked for volunteers to cover 100 yards of open ground to come reinforce our position, Hovater was the first one to jump up. And what I learned from him is that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to move forward in the face of it. With just bullets falling like raindrops, this 24-year-old kid stood up, raised his hand again, and said, "I'll go," and he went, despite probably the overwhelming fear that he had. And I like to share that story because it's still something that I try to aspire to, that I hope that I could have the courage that Jason Hovater had. I think about Jason Bogar. It was challenging for him coming into our unit. So he was a replacement while we were deployed. He had served in the National Guard. I think he had completed 2 tours. He was not airborne qualified, which is a big deal when you come to an airborne unit. We gave him quite a hard time about not being qualified. He would have been when we got back. But despite being to war twice, this being his 3rd time, and losing friends, he never lost his compassion for the people that we were trying to help. And I can remember him genuinely caring for the people he served with, but also the people of Afghanistan that we were trying to help. And, Matt Kaler was very much the same way. Just a kind guy. He was our platoon sergeant. He didn't need to be nice, but he would ask you something even when he didn't have to. And, both of them kind of taught me that compassion and kindness aren't weakness. It takes strength to be like that in the face of overwhelming reasons not to be. And so it's really a privilege to keep their memory alive and share what I think are valuable lessons that they taught me.
I greatly appreciate that you recognize them and so many others, that you remember all their names, that you say their names, maintains that loss. It's so easy for us to relegate our servicemen and women who are lost to a total number instead of the individuals that they were. So thank you so much, not only for sharing their names, but for telling us a little bit about them. You actually, in what you just said, answered several questions that people asked about. Someone asked, how can we teach kids empathy and kindness? And you demonstrated that. And what fears do you have? Well, it wasn't personal, but other people's fears. I think one that kind of wraps all these, several of those things together, someone asked, and this is actually from a preschool teacher, what does honor mean to you?
I think honor's doing the right thing when everybody's watching or no one's watching, just because it's the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. And that has nothing to do with, physical danger. It can be emotional. It can be standing up to people that have opinions different than you, maybe even if it's people that you respect. It's just doing what needs to be done because it's the right thing to do. But I can come back to you'd mentioned the empathy and kindness, and I thought about that question a little bit, and I think it's a great one. What I've tried to do, and I think it came from what I talked about, the experience of being around all sorts of different people with different opinions, is I've tried to think about what it's felt like when somebody has not understood what I'm trying to communicate or valued my experiences and how that's made me feel. I've only ever walked in my shoes. I've never walked in anybody else's shoes, and I'll never walk in anybody else's shoes. So when somebody else is trying to share something, I try and think about how it's made me feel when I haven't been heard or haven't been respected. And so I try to see things from their perspective. I'm not saying that I'm always successful, but I think it's the effort that counts. And I think that's how we can try to teach empathy and kindness. And like what I said before is kindness isn't weakness. No, it's my kids are going to learn more from my actions than my words. And when I'm kind, when I don't have to be, when there's every justification not to be kind, that speaks louder than words.
One of the things I liked about that question was that it used the word honor, and you came back right away with doing the right thing, even when no one's looking, which I've heard many other Medal of Honor recipients use that same definition for the word integrity. And in the character program, which is based on the Medal of Honor, interestingly, integrity, commitment, sacrifice, courage, and then inaction, citizenship, and patriotism, those things all fit together. And so all these things I think you are demonstrating here, and I appreciate your connection with your own children. One person wrote in ahead of time, how would you, any ideas on how to convince students to be great citizens even at a young age?
I look at citizenship as about service to the country, and military service is not the only way. Nonprofit service, there's first responders, medical service, there's money, there's giving of time, there's giving of knowledge. I think this is an incredible country, and I think we all have an obligation to give something back. And I think, communicating that it doesn't matter how big you are, what your resources are, you have something to give. This country isn't perfect. We've accomplished amazing things, and we've also had our failures. And I think the only way that we can move forward and become the country that we want to be is by everybody serving and giving something back. That's how we get to what we're meant to be.
You mentioned to me earlier in the week that one of the people who you thought probably influenced your life most was your grandfather. Are you willing to share a little about what he did?
Yes. So my grandfather was an educator. He started out, I believe, he was a substitute teacher in Massachusetts, and then eventually, at the end of his career, he was a vice principal at a high school in Massachusetts. And I can remember hearing stories um, about him from my family, and I've bumped into people over the years that knew him from the school that he taught at, and to always hear, the kind words that they had to say about him and the man that he was. For instance, my family had told the story about one time when a kid had brought a gun into school when he was a vice principal, and as he's trying to get everybody away, he's also moving towards that student to try and get them to give up the weapon. I've heard stories about, believe that there was a student who had suicidal ideations. He kept them in his office and wouldn't let them go until he could get them the help that he needed. Even after his retirement, he still gave back. I can remember one of their neighbors was an elderly gentleman, and my grandparents helped keep up his house and helped him with firewood, and if he needed to go to town and things like that. And my grandfather was always a quiet professional. He never beat his chest about how good he was at anything, and I always admired that about him, that he did the right thing because it was the right thing to do and expected no accolades in return.
It sounds like not only did you learn that from him, but you brought it with you along the way. Another teacher asked this is from a middle school, which I think is exceptionally important. I have huge respect and appreciation for middle school teachers who probably saved my own middle school children when they were growing up. What advice do you have for our nation's youth when they're presented with conflict? You may have already answered this in some way, but directly for students, what do you think about that?
I think it's important to be conscious of your feelings, acknowledge and reflect, but not to be controlled by it. There's a lot to be said for. I learned this in combat, just because I saw it at a young age, but I've applied it elsewhere. Is just keeping your head when others around you might be losing them. Is staying focused in the moment, and with conflict can come disagreements. don't forget to respect other people, their experiences, their opinions. We don't have to like or agree with them, but listening can broaden our experiences, and I think we can find some level of understanding, and that's the only way to kind of move forward. Don't back down from doing the right thing, and if you're not sure, seek more information. We were talking before about honor, doing the right thing when no one's looking. It can be just as hard, sometimes harder, when everyone is watching. When you have to go against the grain, don't be afraid to do that. And I think it's important to remember that the desired outcome of conflict is some sort of resolution, and to keep in mind that it might not be your idea, your proposal, your way, but to get behind and back the best decision. We used to talk about that in the military. It's not a democracy for sure, but we would have conversations about a mission, and different opinions would come from us with different experiences, and you could have those lively conversations. But once you decide on a course of action, everybody commits to it, and you give it your best, even if it's not your idea.
That, I think, leads kind of nicely into another question that one of our viewers, this came from Clear Creek Independent School, and they were asking, what are your hopes for the future of Afghanistan? Given that that's where this combat mission carried on, and we've had so much conflict within the country over there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be self-determination, that they get to choose and become whoever it is that they want to be. After being there, being around people that are different than myself, their culture is different than American culture. That doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make us better. It's just different. And maybe what works for us or how we want to live is not how they should live. They should decide what fits, their values, and the country that they want to become. So, I hope that they can aspire to become what it is they want to be, peacefully.
So I'm going to switch over to some questions about the Medal of Honor for a bit. Obviously, nobody goes into the service saying, at least I don't think they do, I'm going to get a Medal of Honor, because at least if you know what it's really about, because that part above and beyond the call of duty is a lot more than the video game would imply. Did you play that video game when you were a kid?
I might have.
I have sons the same age as you. I have sons your same age, so I'm very familiar with that. But I think that one of the things that I've gotten these questions for almost every webinar I've done with a Medal of Honor recipient, and I've interviewed a number of the Vietnam recipients who are, for the most part, in their 70s and 80s, and I've interviewed a couple of World War II and Korean veterans who are into their 90s. And when this question comes to them, the question is, how has receiving the Medal of Honor impacted your life? And for them, they said, I've had it for 60, 70 years, so it's a little hard for them to remember life without the Medal of Honor. For you, now it's probably been close to a third of your life, but it's still only, your action was in 2008, so only 12 years ago, and you were actually awarded the medal in 2014, correct?
Yep, correct. Yep.
So that's only been 6 years. How have things gone differently than you ever thought they might have otherwise?
I think first is it changed the way I think. Like you mentioned, some people, and I was one of them. I think it's pervasive in the military. We value awards; they represent what we think is accomplishment. And you think, or I'll speak for myself. What I thought I saw as the perception of the Medal of Honor is one individual doing an incredible act and being recognized for that. For me, that's not my reality. As I mentioned before, I was just trying to keep up with everybody around me. All those 9 guys that I listed off, they died fighting to their last breath. And there were so many other guys that fought wounded, risked their lives, that it really is an individual award for a collective effort. I'm just a caretaker, a representative, I think, of all of our actions that day. I was just trying to keep up with everybody else around me. I mean, they inspired me to do the things that I did. I can't say that those were all my own ideas. I was just looking around,
Right.
watching all these people when there's every reason to duck and hide, they were standing up. And so it's changed my perspective in the sense that very rarely is it an individual action. It is a commitment to the team. You know, and a lot of us, I wouldn't be here without the actions of the other people. I think they gave more. They saved me. As far as life has changed, you know, like I had mentioned, leaving the military, I thought that that chapter was behind me. The award is presented an opportunity like this to be able to share the lessons I learned, to be able to continue to serve, to keep the memories of my friends alive, to talk about all those that were never acknowledged. And that's certainly something that's come with the Medal of Honor in my mind, is that, you know, nothing is ever accomplished by just one individual. It is a multitude of actions by multiple people, lots of people, you know, just like in my case. And those people are not always recognized for their contributions, which may not get the same amount of attention, but that does not diminish their importance to the end result. And so being able to highlight, you know, all the incredible things that everybody else did that day. You know, Jason Hovader, Jason Bogar, Lieutenant Brostrom, Matthew Phillips. There were other guys there that came to my aid. There was a final push. You know, when I get to talk about leadership, and I'm sure that's going to come up, yeah, I think about one of our soldiers, Jacob Sones. He made it home, but I was isolated at the outpost by myself for a time. I was wounded. I couldn't leave. And I called over the radio for help. And I said, this is Chosen 9-2. You know, you need to send more reinforcements or this position's going to fall. And my company commander, you know, the burden of command is making decisions that are going to win the fight. And that includes making some difficult decisions sometimes. And he came back and said, there's no one to send. You're just going to have to hang on. Well, Jacob Sones, the lowest ranking guy in our platoon, heard my call over the radio, as did everybody else, and he could hear the enemy talking in the background over my radio. And he said, that's Sergeant Pitts up there. He needs our help. We're going to get him. You know, junior guy on the battlefield, first deployment, and says, I'm going. So his squad leader, Israel Garcia, they move to another position. They link up with Sean Samaru and Mike Denton, and they fought their way into the OP and saved my life. I get to tell that story because leadership isn't about position or title. It's about taking action, and anybody can be a leader, just like Jacob was that day. And Jake's part of the reason that I'm here.
I want to point out to our listeners that what I keep hearing and what I have heard over the years, not just today from you, but over the years from many other Medal of Honor recipients, is that unlike what kids who play the Medal of Honor video game might see much of, this medal is not just an offensive and combat medal. I keep hearing save and protect and gave, and that the teamwork that was involved and that what was going on out there was indeed fighting for each other and saving what is important, not only both ideologically for the things that you swore to defend and protect when you signed up for the service, but also at that moment for the people who are physically there with you. And I so appreciate hearing those remarks about the medal in that regard. You mentioned leadership. Questions have come in about a couple of different questions about leadership, everything from how would you teach it? What would you tell kids about it? What do you think about it? And you've addressed it in a lot of ways, but do you have any specific suggestions, especially as you look back at yourself as the kid who was, comfortable with the bees? One of mine was absolutely comfortable with bees, and one was comfortable with a lot less. But they turned out okay too. And but we have teachers who deal with that all the time, and who really, teachers and parents who want their kids to try to be the very best they could be. Do you have any thoughts about encouraging them to step up beyond that and be leaders? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess first, when you're in a leadership position, and I'm thinking back to my military leadership, is
Right.
don't forget what the mission is. Your job as a leader is to accomplish something, an end goal. And I think you may not be everything that you need to be in that moment, but it's the pursuit. It is keeping in mind what you are trying to accomplish and taking the steps necessary to get there. And those steps may not necessarily be leading just your team, but also yourself. What are your deficiencies? Where can you be better? I look at leadership as it's helping get the team to where they need to be. I thought a lot. My leadership style evolved a bit while I was in the military. I was a team leader. When I was a sergeant, from everybody just gets yelled at to okay, people are different. Sometimes people need different things, and everybody deserves to be treated with respect all the time. Yeah, and what I said before, like leadership isn't about position or title. Somebody can be a captain on your football team, on your soccer team, on your swim team, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be the leader that team needs in every moment. Anybody on that team can step up like Jacob did that day. And he was just one of many that led in their own way to step up and help inspire the team to do what needs to be done. And I think it's important to remember that don't get caught up in the emotion of or the joy of maybe getting promoted to that leadership position. Don't forget that it's your job to I think essentially take care of people. And I would say don't be afraid as a leader to get to know people on a personal level. I think about it back from the military. If I need to care about you to lead you effectively, how can I care about you if I don't know you at all?
I love that piece of advice. I think too often leadership is presented as a separation between people, between ranks, as it were, if not necessarily in the military, but between levels of people, and that getting to know people makes a huge difference.
Well, you're
I think
serving them. I think that's part of leadership is realizing that you are a servant of the led. You might be
that,
in charge, but your responsibility is to take care of all those people and accomplish the mission. They don't serve you, you serve them.
and hence the respect that you mentioned.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. That is super. I want to take a look for a minute. When you gave the commencement speech at University of New Hampshire, that I would recommend everybody go watch that video afterwards. That's not only a great speech, but it looked like you were having a whole lot of fun doing that. Hey, I have a side question, kind of a personal question. Have you always been so comfortable with public speaking? Most of us are scared to death of it, and you seem really comfortable with it.
No, no, I wasn't always very comfortable with it. Uh, my wife is a trusted advisor. She's always let me know when I maybe necessarily haven't hit the nail on the head. Um, I just tried to wed myself to the message. I think any level of comfort that I get comes from I just talk about what I care about, and when I talk about the guys, it used to be harder emotionally, but it's the easiest thing to find the words for.
I bet, and I suspect that you did not expect that as a uh, result of being awarded the Medal of Honor that you would become a public speaker.
Wasn't in my plans.
Okay, well, from going back to that speech, which I think was really beautifully done, you mentioned four main points, and you reiterated them. What, and I'm just going to take them from the very end and ask if you would like to expound on any of these. You challenged the graduates to look for the next horizon, to always be looking for what more they could do. You challenged them to put others first, which of course you just addressed with the leadership question. You challenged them to be courageous in the face of fear, and then never forget others and your relationships with them. Do you have anything that you would like to explain further or suggest to our audience, specifically of educators today?
Yeah, I think I know it's challenging, but is to force people, encourage them to get uncomfortable. That's what challenge is. And challenge can be physical, like I mentioned before, it can be physical, emotional, mental, intellectual. But that's the only way that we grow, right? I love to lift weights. I love to work out. The only way that I get stronger faster is by pushing into kind of those uncomfortable areas of trying to run faster for as long as I can, or lifting more, lifting longer, lifting smarter. That I think we learn a lot about ourselves, that we can grow a lot when we continue to push ourselves to become uncomfortable. And I don't think that we should lose that. You know, when I was talking about fear, and that was just a snippet of it, when I talked about it there, I didn't mean just physical. It kind of along the same lines as what I was saying before. It can be disagreeing with people that you respect. You know, sticking to your guns and not staying silent when you know what is right. Now, granted, you know, you got to, some things are concrete and this is right, this is wrong, but also acknowledging, having the courage to acknowledge, you know, maybe when it's gray and you just have to listen and get uncomfortable again. You know, I think back when the point I try and drive home about respect is I look at the greatest strength that we had as a unit was the trust that we had in each other. Was that when I was in that battle and there weren't enough people to do all the things that needed to be done, and there certainly wasn't enough time to turn around and make sure everybody was doing everything right, that we had that trust, that I didn't have to turn around and look at what Jason Bogar was doing or Pruitt Rainey. They stepped up and they did it. I could trust them that when they saw something that needed to be done, that they were going to do it. And I think that trust, part of it comes from competence, being together, demonstrating that you're going to live up to your word. But I think the foundation always comes back to respect. You have to see everybody as worthy as human beings. You need to respect their dignity as human beings as a starting point. That's the foundation that the house is built upon. That's the point that I was trying to make.
So you mentioned being together and building that trust. Had you been together as a team for a long time? And how did it take a long time to build that trust? Or do you think that came out of your initial training as you went into the service?
No, every unit's different. You know, there was iteration. So, for instance, you know, when I first got to the 173rd in Italy, that was my unit. I got there in February of 2004. It didn't matter that I just went through basic training in airborne school. I had to show up, listen, learn, and demonstrate that I could live up to the expectations of everybody around me to build that trust. And it took time. I mean, we spent a year at that point in time. We were on the U.S. Army was on a cycle where you deployed for a year, you were home and trained to deploy again, and then you deployed again. And so you had that year to do the things that you needed to do to become competent and develop that trust. And then certainly more trust was developed once we were in theater in a combat zone. And then it was reestablished when we came back and new people came in. I did benefit from the fact that I got to spend 4 years with some of the people that I showed up to Italy with. And we trained for that year. We went to combat for a year, came back. We graduated and became the team leaders, and then deployed again. And so really that trust amongst us was absolute. It had been demonstrated time and time again under the most trying circumstances. But it was also our responsibility as leaders to bring that next group up to that level, to share what we knew so we could instill, bring them up to the level that we could trust them in the ways that we needed to, and making sure that everybody was treated with respect. So it is something that takes time. I mean, it's something you want on day one, but you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes time, and there's going to be uncomfortable times. There's going to be conflict. That's part of getting to know each other and understanding, okay, what do we all value? Okay, this is what we can agree on that we all value. Let's focus on that. Let's not ignore all these other things maybe where we disagree, but just respect that we can have differences of opinions. It's fine. We don't have, it'd be very boring if we were all the same person.
Absolutely. We probably wouldn't get everything done either. You know, it makes me think in terms of our educators who are listening today and trying to take these incredible life lessons that you have here and apply them to middle school, high school, even upper elementary school classrooms, that when we have the opportunity to be back in classrooms together again, eventually, we hope in the fall, that maybe some of those group projects that some of us dreaded so much as students. I was not a big fan of group projects, but I think it was, looking back at it, I never thought of it this way. I was worried about the grade, the end project, and not having trust in everyone to do his or her part in getting that project done, and therefore feeling like I had to do it myself. And I think that perhaps if we add that element to our school projects for kids, that might help them take a new look at a project, a group project, and how they could get it done, and that they have to rely on each other. I think that that could be a really useful classroom lesson for them. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I think we also, in terms of trust, I think people generally, we tend to live up or down to the expectations that people have of us. And I remember it a lot in the military. You know, I got to the point where it's okay, treat people like children, they're going to act like children. Treat them, and I guess that's a bad analogy there. Treat people like they're going to let you down, and they will let you down.
Yes.
Set high expectations, and I think it can instill a sense that you have that belief in that person, that what you're expecting of them is achievable.
Respect, absolutely. Back to respect. We are all but out of time here. I want to. I'm going to quote you to yourself. Paraphrase. I think this was perhaps at the end of the UH speech, or maybe at the American Legion speech. I watched a lot. You said, to paraphrase you, that we varied in beliefs, origins, and backgrounds, but we were all Americans, and we were stronger together than we ever could have been individually. When we focus, and this is, I quoted this carefully, when we focus on shared purpose, respect our differences, and put others before self, nothing is impossible. Those are such wise words, Ryan, and it sounds to me like a kind of a accumulation of what you've become at this point. Do you have any more thoughts you want to share with us now, from the perspective maybe of being a father and having young school children at home with you, or give us something to take away here?
You know, I think something that we can all find in common is, you know, we have differences of opinion, differences of belief, but I think at the end of the day, we all want to prosper in our lives, and we want our children to prosper, and that's some common goal that I think we all can get behind, that we can all rally around. And I think when meeting people that are different, I think without even knowing them, most of us can acknowledge that they probably feel those same things, and just keeping that in mind. You know, like what you said before about empathy, I think we need empathy to truly listen and hear, to be willing to acknowledge that our experiences aren't the only experiences. And I mean, part of that was learned from, you know, my combat experience. One of the things that I hear sometimes when I talk to other veterans is they'll say, "Oh, well, I served, but I didn't do what you did. Oh, I didn't serve in war." That's not what matters. What matters is that you chose to serve. And in my opinion, service is all equal. There's no, I gave more, you gave less. We did what was asked of us in those moments. And that's what's important.
Thank you so much. We're right at 10 o'clock. I'm going to have to start making these webinars 90 minutes, because I know there are a lot of questions we didn't even get to today, and I would love to continue the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to say thank you again to all those who sponsor the Medal of Honor Society, because it is a nonprofit organization, and their donations make it possible for us to do these webinars, so that school children across the country and even around the world can view these videos later on and hear your wise words. So thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us, Ryan. And I'm going to turn this back over to Diane at EdWeb now.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you so much, Sergeant Pitts, for your service and for sharing your thoughts with us today. I know our educators online will be watching this with their students later, and you've given those students so much great advice. And thank you, Kathy, Noel, and the Congressional Medal of Honor Society for helping us make this possible. And of course, for all of you who logged in today and sent in your questions for Sergeant Pitts. And we encourage you to join our free community on EdWeb. It's at edweb.net/CMOH. As a member, you'll be able to watch past interviews and be notified about upcoming webinars. And of course, visit the Medal of Honor Character Development Program online. There's just a lot of good stuff there. You can request a free character development program thumb drive, access lesson plans, and learn about other recipients, Medal of Honor recipients, even sign up for a live training event in your area. Thank you again, everyone, and we hope to see you next time.